You ready? You ready for the real history? Are you boys ready for the?
Need to like find a new apartment.
You guys ready for the real history of Thanksgiving? Let me switch the music to classical. Where's it at? Did I forget my fucking ABCs for there for a second? You not ready for the truth? Well, see, the problem is that
true history.
I'm going to add everyone in Discord. All right, everyone in Discord's been added. All right. So, the problem with talking about Thanksgiving is that no one gives an accurate account of Thanksgiving. Okay? Which is that there is the elementary school version of Thanksgiving, right? Which is that Thanksgiving, the people on the Mayflower, they broke bread with the Indians. It was a beautiful service over 3 days, and it represents peace, and it represents, people coming together and being thankful for what they have. And then there's the family, right? Then you have the socialist interpretation, which is that Thanksgiving was never true. It was immediate backstabbing. It was the evil white colonialists that have destroyed everything. And then you have the truth. And we're going to go over the truth tonight. Because the truth is that the socialist reinterpretation is kind of right. But they miss some principal elements. And they retell it in a really fucked up bent. And the other thing is that they do not talk in any way, shape, or form about why Thanksgiving was instantiated, about what Thanksgiving originally meant, and the fact that Thanksgiving occurred before Thanksgiving, which might surprise you. So,
number 10 really did shock me.
There's only 9 slides, all right? So number 9 will shock you boys. But I want to talk about Thanksgiving. Also, interestingly enough, I just did this today. And so Mark has not seen this.
Yeah, so we're all going to learn together, chat.
All right, so I put together a short little presentation because we're going to have Thanksgiving tomorrow. So we should talk about Thanksgiving, right? We should have this conversation. Especially if you have some dumb lefty that's going to bring up some talking points about the evil Thanksgiving. But Thanksgiving is kind of it should be I'll give my opinions on the holiday at the end, and I'll kind of see what Mark has. Now, I am not going into a massive history lesson. Like I said, I just want this to be a short little presentation where we can kind of talk about it and go over the important details. I'm not going to be a massive history nerd here and go into the swamp battle and the different factions involved in the swamp battle and how why the swamp battle turned one Indian tribe that was intending to remain neutral as a faction with the other Indian tribes in King Philip's War. But we're going to talk about King Philip's War.
Well, I'm going to talk about the Bridgewater Triangle, but you talk about King Philip's War.
Will you try not to distract from us talking about Thanksgiving a little, too much into cult stuff?
I mean, I can keep it very brief because it's not something I know too much in depth about. I can just tell you some interesting shit from that region of the world.
All right. So, the original Thanksgiving, right? The first celebration of Thanksgiving. The first celebration of Thanksgiving was in October of 1621. Sort of. Now, this is what most people consider to be the first Thanksgiving. It's not the first time that Native Americans and colonists in America, in the Americas, or in what is now today the United States or British colonies, broke bread with Native Americans as a sign of peace. But in October of 1621, the Pilgrims, after their very first harvest, invited the Wampanoag American Indians to basically a 3-day harvest. Okay. And it was roughly 90 Native Americans and something like 56 pilgrims. They had a 3-day long feast with like conversations that was, limited obviously because of language barriers. There was like children playing potentially. There was some games. It was a really peaceful exchange, right? The technical first Thanksgiving that occurred in the Americas was in Virginia at the colony known as Berkeley Hundred in 1619. This was a Thanksgiving celebration between the colonists higher up the James River from Jamestown. Now, the reason we don't really talk about this is because 3 years later, that entire colony was slaughtered and massacred by those same Native Americans in 1622, known as the Massacre of 1622. So, like, not a lot of long-lasting peace there, right? The real original Thanksgiving, like that peace lasted a couple of years, and then the Native Americans came in and slaughtered everybody. Okay? Now, what people talk about is that it's like this idea of like mutual aid and like friendship and all this stuff. And that is true. But there's another kind of motive here from the Wampanoag Indians. Labrador? What? Oh, no, we're not talking about the Vikings here, okay? We're talking about, no, stop. Okay? Now, Sachem, which is just a title for the Wampanoag that means chief, right? Sachem Osamequin is the chief of the Wampanoag Native Americans in the region. Now, in this region, there's the Pequot, there's some Algonquins, there's the Wampanoag, but their tribe, they kind of have like a rival tribe that they're constantly having skirmishes in. No, there is not wrong area. Don't tell me I'm wrong. Unless you're talking about the Viking shit. Algonquins were here. Okay? There was a limited amount of Algonquins here. So, now, they have this kind of, the Viking shit, yeah. They have kind of this tribe that is like, that they're constantly feuding with, that they're at war with, that they're constantly killing each other. They're kidnapping their women and raping them and turning them into slaves. And
I told you I had to feed Jarvis around this time.
Yeah. I'll wait for you to come back so we can get back to the presentation. We have Sioux here, the most powerful tribe. I mean, sure. I'm part Sioux, but like I'm mostly black. Like I have almost no Native American in me, despite being Melungeon, which is weird. But presumably the Melungeons interbred and intermarried with the Sioux. But I don't have any of those genetic markers. So it must be like an incredibly small amount. Spending the Thanksgiving with the fam tomorrow? I am. I got 0.1% metis on my mom's side. Well, hey, I mean, that's more than Pocahontas. I mean, what is it? What is her name? Why can I not think of her name right now? Elizabeth what? Warren, that's what it is. Elizabeth Warren.
And it's Pocahontas.
Oh, it's Pocahontas now? I thought it was always Pocahontas, but Pocahontas works. All right. So, what this was, the Sioux didn't play around. A lot of them didn't play around. But so what this was is this was establishing a kind of peace treaty of sorts. And the main reason that they wanted to establish this peace treaty is that they wanted an ally against their enemies at the time, the Nagran Sets. Okay, so they're constantly having war. They're constantly fighting each other. They're constantly kidnapping their women. They're selling slaves. They're torturing people. And in comes this kind of new person into the dynamic that can kind of buttress that. And so they attempt to establish this peace treaty. And that's really what the original Thanksgiving, not the one in 1619 in Berkeley Hundred, where 3 years later the Native Americans massacred everybody, but the one in October of 1621 that most people are referencing. And the reason is because the alliance actually did hold for a while, right? The alliance was, oh, see, look, I already fucked up on one of the parentheses. The alliance was like pretty much strong and solid without any issues I mean, there was a couple of like little, disputes, but without any significant issues for at least 15 years, right? So, so long as like we don't encroach in your area, we establish some colonies, but we kind of like, we're doing things with the Wampanoag. There's a lot of trade going on between these Native Americans over this 15 years. I've been in Custer's house since who killed him. Oof.
I've been in McIntosh's house. Oh, sorry, that was I think it was pre-Civil War time. But he was half Scottish, half Cherokee, and then was supposed to like keep the land and like not side with the Americans, and then sold out his people. And before the army could get to him, or maybe they never were on the way, but before the army could get to him, his people killed him and his family in his house and then burned it down.
So back to Thanksgiving, to the Thanksgiving presentation. Yeah, so this piece held relatively well for about 15 years between the Wampanoag and the colonists in the area, right? And so and this area is kind of spread out over Connecticut, over Rhode Island, there's a kind of loose collection of New England, like small colonies, things like that. In school, you learn about like Plymouth Rock and things like that, and Plymouth Plantation, but like there's a lot of little tiny colonies that get set up, in different rivers and in different areas. So, but in 1936, there's some tensions with a specific Native American tribe, right? So this is the Pequot. Okay, now the Pequot tribe is a smaller tribe in the region. They're not a major player in the region. They're a little bit more aggressive. Okay, and so there's one colony that's gone a little bit too far in their territory, and at least what they feel is their territory, right? And so there's some kind of like tensions. And over the course of like about a year and a half, 13 different people are killed by Native Americans. So Governor John Endicott creates a militia, and he says, we're gonna create this militia. We're gonna take out these fucking Indians, right? We're gonna fix this fucking problem because they won't stop killing our people. So the Pequot, before the militia does anything, they respond by going after a small settlement and attacking it with a few hundred Native Americans, right? They do a skirmish. They kill 6 men that were defending the town. They kill 3 women, and they kidnap 2 girls to rape and sell into slavery. Okay? And so Governor John Endicott is like, okay, well, I've already set up this militia to deal with this problem, so we're gonna fucking deal with this problem. And so in a very short period of time, this militia comes in and goes to 3 of the major settlements of the Pequot tribe, and this is the Pequot War of 1636 to 37. Now, but there's 3 major massacres in this area, and of course, it's important to know that there's like the end of one summer, and then there's the winter period, and then there's the summer, right? Because it's important to understand that like war doesn't really happen during the winter with the occasional skirmish or ambush in pretty much all of human history, right? Until like the American Civil War, right? So like it's important to understand that while this is over between 36 and 37, this isn't a lot of engagements. There's like the end of like one summer, then it gets the cold season comes, they hunker down, and then spring comes in, and then they start up again. And there's 3 major massacres. And basically, the region wipes out this entire Native American tribe. They're gone. They're no longer a major player. Like any that still survive basically get assimilated into other Native American tribes because that tribe is basically gone. In 1643, all of these kind of disparate little colonies recognize that they need to set together like a defense force against the Native Americans because they're still expanding. They're writing treaties, and then they're kind of violating the treaties that they write. Like, hey, we're going to stay here. We'll have peace. You have peace. We'll trade. We promise we won't fuck with your shit. And then they just end up building a new settlement or like, cutting down some woods or going, hunting in areas they're not supposed to be hunting in, et cetera, right? So in 1643, they basically have this defensive pact. And there's some minor conflicts, but relatively peaceful. So the Wampanoag and the colonists are still kind of in basic peace. There's a lot of tensions, but also there's a lot of conversion. There are Native Americans that are coming to live with the colonists. They're teaching them Christianity. They're learning the language, and they're often referred to as like Christian Indians. Right? Well, then we have what is known as the bloodiest war in all of American history per capita. No war in American history has ever had the same death rate, conflict, destruction of property in all of American history as King Philip's War. You might hear people say it's the Civil War, where the estimates are roughly 650,000 people that died, right? Somewhere between 500 and 750,000, and there was like a census estimate of like 650,200, like 652 or 656,000, right? But it's somewhere between 500 and 800, roughly, but 650 is the estimate. But nobody really counts King Philip's War, probably because we were not an American nation at that time. These are disparate colonies kind of linking together. But in terms of like the death tolls for the amount of people that lived there on both sides, this is the bloodiest engagement of all. Okay? Now, this is known as King Philip's War, but it's also known as Metacom's Rebellion. It's also known as the First Indian War, and it's also known as the Great Narragansett War. You could find references in history and in history books, etc., under all of these names. Now, up until this point, right, so this is 66 to 67? Sorry, I'm trying to remember 75 to 76, sorry. 75 to 76. Okay? Will this count as the bloodiest war in American history if this, predates the country's founding? Exactly, right? That's another reason why some people don't count it that way. But nevertheless, often you'll see the French and Indian War included in terms of like rankings of bloody wars, as well as the Revolutionary War. So, and this was bloodier than all of them. Nevertheless, what happened? Why did this war kick off? Well, Sachem Massasoit, Sachem being chief again from the Wampanoag, right? He has a treaty. He negotiates a treaty with Plymouth Plantation. And again, the Pilgrims repeatedly violate their own treaties that they set up. They're like, we promise we're going to stay in this area. We promise we're not going to hunt in these places, right? They don't kill anybody. They don't destroy anybody's property. They're not out here doing really fucked up shit. And when there is a conflict, they hold trials. Interestingly enough, it was a common practice at the time, if there was conflict between Native Americans, that they had actually would set up a court system that would have a jury, and that jury would be made up of Wampanoag Native Americans as well. It becomes important later on, but this is a common practice. So even if the colonists do something that they feel violates the rights, or they somebody kills somebody or something, they would put them on trial, but they would put them on trial with Wampanoag Indians also judging, like whether or not they're guilty. Now, Massasoit dies, okay? He doesn't die of anything like any nefarious means. He just dies. He gets old and dies. But I don't know. I couldn't find any historical reference as to what killed him. I think he just died, like had a heart attack or some shit. And his first son, Wamsuta, which we call Alexander, that's his English name, Alexander. He is accused of plotting war against people in Plymouth, right? Against the colonists. And so they arrest him to interrogate him. Well, he died during questioning. Okay? Like he's brought in, arrested for plotting war. The chief of the Wampanoag people is brought in, and then he gets killed. Which is like, we don't know if we tortured him to death. We don't know if it was accidental. There's no reports of what killed him. It's just, we arrested him and he died during questioning. Whatever that means, it probably means that the Pilgrims like beat the shit out of him and tortured him to death. Though he could have just died from a heart attack or something random. We don't know, right? But it is not a good look. And so Metacom, also known as Philip, takes over. And that is Alexander's the second brother. We tortured some folks. Brandon Obama's son, first mayor of Plymouth, right? And so his second son, Metacom, takes over. And this is, we call him Philip. So he becomes Hashem of the Wampanoag tribe. And surprise, surprise, Metacom's not real fond of the colonists. You know, they've been violating all of their treaties. They kind of are gaining more power against their rival tribe. The what is it, Nagarenset? I have to look at it to be able to fucking pronounce it. Right? But their rival tribe is like losing power. Right? And so their rival tribe, like they're the dominant tribe. And like their rival tribe really doesn't want to fuck with them that much anymore. And on top of that, we're violating our treaties. We're like encroaching upon their territory as like we like kind of made, as we said we wouldn't. Right? And you know, and we're encroaching upon their way of life. These are nomads, right? Like these are people that like, you know, roam kind of all of the land, is like being free for everybody, unless because another tribe they don't like is using it, then they murder those people and rape their women. But so long as, you know, there's enough for everybody to go around, you know, it's everybody's. The moment there's not enough to go around, we start killing people. And we just start like, you know, building settlements, being like, this is, you know, look at me, like I'm the captain now. Like these are our lands. And we probably murdered his older brother and chief of the tribe. And the tribal leadership is looking to him to like kind of do something about this. Well, he decides he's going to do something about it, which is he's going to wage war on the people of Plymouth, the colonists, you know, all of the colonists in the Connecticut, Rhode Island region.
You know, I get it.
Now, interestingly enough, one of the things we don't talk about that much is how much the Native Americans and the colonists interbred. Two major people within the King's War story are mixed. They're Native American and Christian. John Sassamon, right, who is a mixed individual that lived with the tribe. Okay. John's not his like English name. That's literally his name. And then he has a tribal name, right? So he's a Christian Indian that is descended, that is, you know, a young man that is also descended from the settlers. Well, he learns that the Wampanoag are going to attack. And so he warns of an incoming attack. Okay? He lets people know. He leaves the village. And he basically says like, hey, you know, after you've been violating all of your treaties and, you know, killed the chief of this tribe, the new chief, who just happens to be brother of the guy you killed, yeah, he's planning on attacking you guys. You guys need to get ready. And then he's found dead, stabbed to death in a lake. Right? And there's some evidence. So instead of defending the fortifications and like getting ready for the impending Native American attack, the colonists try to ease tensions. So they set up a trial, and this trial is half Native American. Half of the individuals on this trial are Native American. And they found 3 Wampanoag men guilty of stabbing him to death, of stabbing John Sassamon to death for warning about the incoming attacks. This was June 8th, 1675. And then we hung those 3 people. We didn't return them to the tribe. We hung 3 people that were supposedly involved in the murder, put them on trial, and then also drew and quartered them. So we like deeply disrespected the body. I say we like I'm like I have anybody from New England, but you know, as Americans. So Metacom or Philip, just starts raiding villages, raiding colonists. And he gets several tribes all together. Now, their main enemy tries to stay neutral in this, but eventually they're dragged into the war too. And this starts a campaign of Native American massacres. Okay, they go in, they kill people, they try and kill everybody, and then they run away. Kind of like, they don't try and conquer the fortifications or anything. They just run in and kill as many people as they can. And he even brings in the Algonquin. The first major battle is in Swansea, June 23rd, 1675. And right in the beginning, the colonists are like, well, how do we stop this? Well, we're at war. So what they do is they go to Metacom's home village, which is near Mount Hope in Rhode Island. And they massacre that whole village, women and children and all. That was like an immediate response, is they kill all the women and children, and they kill his home village, and they're like, hey, we killed all your family and we killed all your people. You're going to stop now, right? Well, lo and behold, that didn't work. Turns out that if you murder somebody's grandparents and cousins and all the women and children in your home village, that doesn't be like, oh, okay, you got me. You know what I mean? We don't want a Hatfields and McCoys situation here. So September 9th, 1675, the New England, what is it called? I forget. New England Confederation. They declare war against King Philip. They call him King Philip because he basically negotiates a treaty with a lot of different Native American tribes in the area to all work together to kill all the white man, right? I recognize that we have our differences, but none of us have any differences as bad as the colonists. Let's kill all the colonists. And the Algonquin participate, as well as a few other smaller tribes. You will learn our peaceful ways by force.
And they did.
Yeah, now you have no reason to be peaceful, nothing to protect, everything to risk. Exactly. And so this war drags on for a little while. It is the bloodiest war that has ever been fought in American history, if you include it, if you go by per capita. The Narragansett are eventually pulled into the war after, and that was our fuck up. We attacked a fortification of the Narragansett because they were trying to remain neutral, but the Narragansett basically weren't going to let us raid into an area because it required going through their area and their fortifications. So we were like, okay, well then we'll just kill you. Not a good plan. Now, the aftermath basically wipes out most of the Wampanoag, which is kind of why the story of Thanksgiving really ends here. Because this tribe does have descendants that exist today, but they did not remain like a tribe in the area that had any power, that had any political treaties, that had any recognition. There's just a group of collective people that ran away and tried to maintain their culture and tradition that still exists today. And they consider Thanksgiving a day of mourning because it's a day that represents the wiping out of their tribe and the white man coming and breaking all the agreements that they would have with them and killing them all. Which is kind of fair, right? I mean, if you're a Wampanoag descendant, it's kind of a fair way of looking at Thanksgiving. But it was a peace that lasted relatively for 50 years, with some minor issues and left a lot of intermarrying and a lot of exchange and a lot of cultural exchange and trading and things like that. We shall mourn with this party pack of Coors Light delivered to us by the DoorDash. Yeah. So one ambush, Narragansett ambush, that is probably really important to probably the most devastating and to understand the psychology of the time, right? That you kind of can't really mention King Philip's War. We could talk about the Great Swamp Battle. We could talk about there's several key battles, and we could really go into nerd history here. But one that is really important is the Nine Men's Misery. Nine Men's Misery is kind of a rallying cry for the colonists at Plymouth Rock because the Narragansett ambushed 60 colonists that also had 20 Christian Wampanoag. So this was a peaceful group during winter times, which is significant at the time, right? Like there's kind of an understanding that you leave each other alone during the winter. At least the English have this understanding. The Native Americans don't have this understanding. But to the English mind, it's like, look at how evil and savage these people are. They're literally raiding people while they're trying to hold up for winter. Like, this is like a barbaric idea. And not only that, but they kill a bunch of Wampanoag Christians, right? That like these are not colonists that are really engaged in the war at all. They capture 9 people from that raid. They murder the rest, right? So they murder like 70 people and then they capture 9. And then they openly and publicly and slowly torture them to death in gruesome, horrible ways. They cut them, they like chop off fingers, they beat them. I think they have like horses trample one person, and like they send messengers out to let everybody know that that's what we did to your people. I think they raped one woman to death. Like but the problem is that we have accounts from colonists about what they said that they did, but we don't have any like primary source documents, right? So it could be that they just like tortured people to death, right? We don't like the details can be like a little bit of the telephone game. And now they steal our money at casinos. You're the dumbass that goes there. You didn't steal it.
You happily gave it over on the idea that you might become a millionaire after you go.
Yeah. So, Chief Canonchet, who is the chief of the Narragansett, is shot and is caught and captured. And towards the end of the war, the colonists start to push back. But in the beginning of the war, they're basically pushed all the way to the sea. And all of the other little minor colonies and engagements, all those people are dead. Like, we don't really have a good estimation of how many people died, but we know that of all of the people in the region, somewhere between 70 to 80% of all of the colonists were wiped out. And the same is true for the Native Americans. Like we're talking about a war that doesn't just kill the soldiers, but kills the women and children and kills most of them. Okay? And they end up falling back to Plymouth Rock, Plymouth Plantation. They end up having to abandon a lot of colonies temporarily, but they push back. And there's in April of 1676, Chief Canonchet is captured and then he is beheaded. Okay. After his beheading, Philip, who's on the run and we're chasing him, King Philip or Metacom, right? Metacom is shot by English Indian soldier John Alderman. John Alderman, he gets the kill shot, right? He gets the confirmed kill. Is he really the one that shot him and killed him? We don't know. There seem to be some people that think that he gets the kill shot even if he didn't because they wanted peace in some regard and they wanted to make it seem like a Native American killed him and then it was like a mixed Native American British individual, Englishman, so that it's like, this is what ends it all, you know what I mean? Like the blending, like assimilate or die kind of situation. But nevertheless, Philip is killed. And Philip is then drawn and quartered, right? Which means he's his dead body is dragged and then his dead body is hung despite being dead. Then they behead his body and then they put his head on a spike at Plymouth Rock for 20 years as a warning towards any Native Americans that would dare fight against the colonists. Just so you know, we will utterly decimate. Well, devastate is probably a better term because most of the Wampanoag were destroyed. So let's say, maybe not quite 90%, but that tribe is destroyed. The Narragansett are destroyed. That's kind of the end of the history of Thanksgiving, the original Thanksgiving, is that The colonists came, they had a peace treaty against, the Narragansett with the Wampanoag. They worked together in relative peace. There was some skirmishes. There was a Paroquet War. Tensions rise. And then eventually we get King Philip's War, which basically wipes out the tribe that we broke bread with. And that's kind of like there's no more Thanksgiving there. There's no more treaty there because they're mostly dead. And then from this point on, we kind of just expand and push the Indians out further and further. So that's the story of the original Thanksgiving. Is there anything you wanted to talk about before I move on, Mark?
No, that's good.
You want to talk about some crazy triangle fucking thing you were talking about?
I mean,
it's
just the Bridgewater Triangle up in like Connecticut, Massachusetts, that part of the world. There's just a lot of weird shit that happens there. There's also the Hockomock Swamp where people swear they see some of the King Philip's second in command after he took over and continued the war. Like they see him there. There's also the legend of the missing, I think it's called a wampum belt, that seems to have been lost at sea that belonged to Philip and then his successor. It's like, maybe if we return that to the area, like all the haunting stuff will disappear. But like murder rates are really high there. There's a bunch of like insane asylums up there that have a bunch of weird problems. Like, it's just a strange fucking place.
So what was eaten at the original Thanksgiving? You're probably all right, because most people don't realize that the original Thanksgiving was only held after the harvest of the colonists, and the Native Americans showed up to have a 3-day long feast. So there was probably venison. There was probably everything that was farmed by both the colonists and the Native Americans was probably eaten there, right? Anything that you could historically trace to being made at that time in that region was likely eaten by someone during this 3-day feast. Because this is well over 100 people like coming together and like having a harvest feast. Not eel or dragon. So, what are the origins of Thanksgiving as a holiday? Right, because we've established what the first Thanksgiving was, which is technically Berkeley Island in 1619 in Virginia, but we don't really talk about that because 3 years later, those same Native Americans massacred that entire colony and it was abandoned. So, like, it's not really that. But what are the origins of the holiday? Well, Thanksgiving feasts are actually a colonial tradition amongst all of the American colonies, as well as in Canada and in South America. And the reason for this originally is that you're rationing food on the voyage to the New World. And so it becomes a celebration if you have enough food after you land or after the first harvest to have a really big meal and to come together as a colony and talk about the things that you're thankful for, that you survived, that you made it here. And it's thankfulness, not usually for family, but thankfulness for God and thankfulness for like the Lord Almighty. And like, manifest destiny didn't really exist at the time. Kind of did, but not really, not in the way that like it is in later American history. But it's mostly thankfulness for the survival of the journey and the survival of the first harvest. Oh my God, Angie. Angie says, just got home tuning in, but according to Masshole legend, the Pilgrims fully intended to keep peace with the Native Americans until one day when they made the ultimate sin, drinking all their iced coffee. Oh, it's funny. That's fine. I'll give you that, Angie. Massholes are great. But, so this was a common tradition, right? You land on the ship, you establish a colony, you grow your first harvest, and then after the first harvest, you have this big celebration. And often Native Americans were invited to these because tensions in the early days of colonialism weren't that bad because there wasn't a lot of colonists, and they weren't encroaching upon a lot of land, right? Like they were just trying to set up in a small region. So there were, it was relatively friendly. Now, in terms of American history, technically speaking, the first kind of proclamation of Thanksgiving was in 1777 by George Washington to celebrate the victory at Saratoga. Okay? I could read that one, but that's all you need to know. So it is a proclamation, and throughout American history, before Ulysses S. Grant establishes Thanksgiving as a federal holiday. Most people think it was Abraham Lincoln that establishes Thanksgiving as a federal holiday. Not technically true. He was just the last one to make a proclamation to Thanksgiving, right? His was the last, and then Grant makes it an official federal holiday after him. But the first is after the Battle of Saratoga. And so this becomes a really big thing in American history. Some presidents don't say shit about Thanksgiving. They don't choose to celebrate Thanksgiving. They don't ever make a proclamation about Thanksgiving. But in times where they feel that the nation needs to heal, or they want to kind of like make reconciliation, or when there's a great military victory, or when they basically need a boost in polling, right? And there's a reason that they can do it, they'll make a proclamation of Thanksgiving. Now, the first presidential proclamation of Thanksgiving is October of 1789, given by George Washington. We're going to read his proclamation of Thanksgiving. Let me just pull this up real quick. When I say we, I mean me, but we will read his first proclamation of Thanksgiving so that we can get a better understanding of what these people believed in terms of Thanksgiving. By the President of the United States of America, a proclamation. Whereas it is the duty of all nations to acknowledge the providence of Almighty God, to obey his will, to be grateful for his benefits, and to humbly to implore his protection and favor. And whereas both houses of Congress have by their joint committee requested me to recommend to the people of the United States a day of public thanksgiving and prayer to be observed by acknowledging with grateful hearts the many signal favors of Almighty God, especially by affording them an opportunity peaceably to establish a form of government for their safety and happiness. Now, therefore, I do recommend and assign Thursday, the 26th of November, next to be devoted by the people of these states to the service of that great and glorious being, who is beneficent author of all the good that was, that is, or that will be, that we may then all unite in rendering unto him our sincere and humble thanks for his kind care and protection of the people of this country previous to their becoming a nation, for the signal and manifold mercies and the favorable interpositions of his providence, which we experienced in the course and conclusion of the late war, for the great degree of tranquility, union, and plenty, which we have since enjoyed, for the peaceable and rational manner in which we have been enacted to establish constitutions of our government, for our safety and happiness, and particularly the national one, now lately instituted, for the civil and religious liberty with which we are blessed, and the means we are of acquiring and diffusing useful knowledge, and in general for all the great and various favors which he hath been pleased to confer upon us, and also that we may then unite in most humbly offering our prayers and supplications to the great Lord and ruler of nations, and beseech him to pardon our national and other transgressions, to enable us all, whether in public or private stations, to perform our several and relative duties properly and punctually, to render our national government a blessing to all people by constantly being a government of wise, just, and constitutional laws, discreetly and faithfully executed and obeyed, to protect and guide all sovereigns and nations, especially such as have shown kindness unto us, and to bless them with good government, peace, and concord, to promote the knowledge and practice of true religion and virtue, an increase of science and the increase of science among them and us, and generally to grant unto all mankind such a degree of temporal prosperity as he alone knows to be best, given under my hand at the city of New York, the 3rd day of October, and the year of our Lord, 1789, Washington. Okay, so here we have the first proclamation of Thanksgiving in 1789 by George Washington. It's very obvious that this is a religious holiday designed to give thanks and honor unto God and the recognition that God has protected us and allowed our great nation to thrive. This is without a doubt a Christian holiday in 1789 at least. True religion and science in the same religion. How the fuck does Wellspring, I haven't mentioned God this entire fucking stream, and it's like he fucking just waits he's just fucking waiting in the wings. The moment fucking God gets brought up, he's like, I'm sorry, someone say something about God?
Because that's going to be a no-go for me.
Right? So, in 1789, it's really, but it's important to understand that the time period and what it is celebrating. It's not just celebrating God. It's not meant to celebrate. It is a family gathering, but the family is kind of an assumed thing. In the beginning, we're not really giving thanks to our family. It's not about traveling to get our family together. The family's assumed to be together. This is just meant to be a Christian holiday to give thanks to God that we've made it through hard times, right? And it's to kind of reinvigorate people and to get them on board with this new nation, right? And then the same thing is being done in Saratoga. Thomas Jefferson, the godless heathen deist that he was, Wellspring, chose not to observe Thanksgiving. He didn't think it was important. He didn't think there was a need to establish a Thanksgiving. He basically told, I don't care. Like, we don't need to celebrate God. Like, we have a new nation. I have more important shit to do. It's thinking to give thanks to the watcher of our travels and trials. Yes, basically. Now, in October 3rd, 1863 is the last proclamation. There's several proclamations. If you read them all, you'll see a pattern. They're there to thank God. It's all about God. It's all about Christ, our Lord and Savior, and thanking him for the hard times we've been through, usually to commence a successful battle or to heal a nation that's going through a really hard time. And if we're being honest, it's usually meant to boost the president and to get people happy about the president. Okay? It's like a flexing of the presidential office. Now, Abraham Lincoln does this again for the last time in October 3rd, 1863. So almost 100 years later, we have the very last proclamation of Thanksgiving. After that, Grant makes it a federal holiday. And we just have Thanksgiving on the 3rd November of every month. Of every year, sorry. The 3rd Thursday of every November. Jesus Christ. All right, let's go ahead and read his Thanksgiving proclamation. So, it's not a long one. You'll be fine. But let's be honest, Lincoln is the GOAT of speeches and writings. I fucking hate Lincoln. I think Lincoln did not die a slow and painful enough death. That being said, God, is this man an insanely good writer and orator. On October 3rd, 1863, by the President of the United States of America, a proclamation. Yeah, no, Lincoln was probably the greatest speech writer and or orator of all American history, but he was a monster and he deserved a horrible death. That being said, a proclamation. Here. Yeah, no, I don't give a fuck. Abraham Lincoln's worst president in American history, hands down. The year that is drawing toward its close has been filled with the blessings of fruitful fields and healthful skies. To these bounties, which are so constantly enjoyed that we are prone to forget the source from which they come, others have been added, which are so extraordinary in nature that they cannot fail to penetrate and soften even the heart which is habitually insensible to the ever-watchful providence of Almighty God. In the midst of a civil war and unequaled magnitude and severity, which has sometimes seemed too foreign states to invite and to provoke their aggression. Peace has been preserved with all nations. Order has been maintained. The laws have been respected and obeyed, and harmony has prevailed. Harmony has prevailed everywhere except in the theater of military conflict. While that theater has been greatly contracted by the advancing armies and navies of the Union, needful diversions of wealth and of strength from the fields of peaceful industry to the national defense have not arrested the plow, the shuttle, or the ship. The axe has enlarged the borders of our settlements, and the mines, as well of iron and coal as of the precious metals, have yielded even more abundantly than heretofore. Population has steadily increased, notwithstanding the waste that has been made in the camp, the siege in the battlefield, and the country rejoicing in the consciousness of augmented strength and vigor is permitted to expect continuance of years with large increase of freedom. God, it's so close together, it's hard to read. No human counsel hath devised, nor hath any mortal hand worked out these great things. They are the gracious gifts of the Most High God, who, while dealing with us in anger for our sins, hath nevertheless remembered mercy. It has seemed to me fit and proper that they should be solemnly, reverently, and gratefully acknowledged, as with one heart and one voice by the whole American people. I do therefore invite my fellow citizens in every part of the United States, and also those who are at sea and those who are sojourning in foreign lands, to set apart and observe the last Thursday of November next as a day of thanksgiving and praise to our beneficent Father who dwelleth in the heavens. And I recommend to them that while offering up the ascriptions justly due to him for such singular deliverances and blessings, they do also with humble penitence for our national perversiveness and disobedience condemn to his tender care all those who have become widows, orphans, mourners, or sufferers, and the lamentable civil strife in which we are unavoidably engaged, and fervently implore the interposition of the Almighty God, Almighty hand to heal the wounds of the nation and to restore it as soon as may be consistent with the divine purposes to the full enjoyment of peace, harmony, tranquility, and union. In testimony whereof I have hereunto set my hand and caused the seal of the United States to be affixed, done at the city of Washington, this 3rd day of October, and the year of our Lord 1863, and of the independence of the United States, the 88th. So, again, Thanksgiving's clearly a Christian holiday designed and set forward to honor God. Like there's no argument. Thanksgiving is a Christian holiday. It's a national holiday. It's an American holiday. But anytime you read a proclamation, it doesn't say shit to do with like family or buying shit or Black Friday or, any of that. It's all about reverence to God and thanking him for getting through this time. This Thanksgiving special coupe variant is extra rough. Kind of reminds me of the classic dry aged 2019 blend. Chest press like Giles Corey. Oh, those are words.
Are you sick? Because don't be spreading that in chat.
Right? So, obviously, this is a day that is designed to honor God, that usually occurs in big significant moments in history, or where there's this need from the presidency to try and get people to come together. So, the next question is like, well, why did he need Thanksgiving, right? Like, well, it's really important to understand the date of Thanksgiving. All right? The date of Thanksgiving is October 3rd, 1863. Gettysburg, the Battle of Gettysburg, and then, of course, July 4th, Vicksburg, right, occurs July 1st through 3rd, 1863. So this is after Gettysburg and Vicksburg, okay? Now, most historians recognize Gettysburg and Vicksburg as the kind of turning point in the Civil War. But the problem is this is before the Overland Campaign starting in May of 1864. Okay? The Overland Campaign is the bloodiest part of the war, where Grant simply throws bodies at the South over and over and over again until they're essentially defeated by superior resources and men, not by strategy or anything. Grant was, known as the Butcher for a reason, because he would just throw soldiers into gunfire over and over again, hoping the enemy would run out of ammo.
And damn did it work.
It worked. Oh, you are a lost causer?
Russian history.
No, I'm just someone that actually understands history. But yeah, I mean, like, if you actually understand Civil War history, lost cause is just slang for lefties in academia try and do everything they can to reframe history. At the same time, there is a lost cause movement, like especially in the 1950s in the American South, to like that
1850s.
No, 1950s.
Okay, yeah.
Well,
I know.
Lost cause happens right after 1865. There's an attempt to rewrite history, but like it gets even. There's this like resurgence, especially with the civil rights movement, of like really trying to repaint the Civil War with a bunch of bullshit. But yeah, so this is before the Overland Campaign, and so in the North, there's not a lot of There is some confidence. And so he's trying to solidify that confidence. Because, yes, the South was pushed out of Gettysburg, pushed out of Vicksburg, pushed back into Virginia. D.C. is safe again. But at the same time, this war was supposed to be like a couple months, and the North was just supposed to crush the South. And it's been going on for over 2 years. And they've pushed in deep. They've pushed deep into the Union, and a lot of people have died. But it is a victory. So he's trying to solidify that victory, solidify his popularity, and also like pretend like he's trying to heal this nation when really Abraham Lincoln never cared about healing this nation. He cared about preserving the Union, right? And that meant he'd kill as many people as he could. And he'd commit as many war crimes and do as many terrible fucking things as possible in the name of a victory, including his own election victory, right? I mean, he refused to take McClellan's plan, which probably would have saved God knows how many lives, doing an amphibious assault into Richmond as opposed to the Overland Campaign. But unfortunately, that was McClellan's campaign, so we might lose the bid for re-election in 1864. Southern generals, on average, wanted flashy tactics and didn't know shit about strats. That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. Robert E. Lee is known is still taught to this day in war colleges as one of the most brilliant generals in world history. Not just American history, in world history. Robert E. Lee is now, Robert E. Lee did own slaves. And lost cause people will be like, he didn't own slaves. He was gifted slaves, and it took him a long time to get rid of them. There are a lot of lies told about Robert E. Lee.
Which, sounds like he owned them.
Yeah. He was like, he was like, I'm a free him, but I got to be able to afford it first. And, I can't afford it right now. And you guys got to work off your debt to it was, yeah. He kept slaves.
It wasn't great.
And he didn't treat them well. Nevertheless, so he needed to justify an increasingly unpopular war, right? There were a lot of Northern Democrats that opposed war. There was a lot of war protesters, and Lincoln was, shutting down newspapers. He was arresting journalists. He was arresting war protesters. He was taking war protesters and putting them in Confederate uniforms and then locking them up and then selling tickets to abuse and like throw rotten vegetables and shit like that to Confederate soldiers, to people that were just war protesters. He did this to people that showed up with baked pies, saying that we're all Americans and we should just eat pie and like we should just have peace and stop this war. Like the most sweet pacifist war protesters.
Because if it wasn't apple pie, then it wasn't American.
Yeah, no, that's not true, Peacecraft. My dad believes the Confederacy should have won the war with their superior officers. They didn't have superior officers. They had superior cavalrymen. They had superior cavalry for sure. Like the officers in the cavalry understood tactics with cavalry. They were very good at it. Whereas Northerners, it took a long time for them to have like any form of like a cavalry. And Robert E. Lee obviously was amazing. Also, Beauregard doesn't get enough respect. Beauregard was pretty good. But the Anaconda Plan was just too. God damn it, you're getting me into Civil War history. Stop it. So, polls are closing in. He needed Thanksgiving. He needed to establish this as a federal holiday. Well, as a proclamation of Thanksgiving, which was then later established as a federal holiday following the war. So that is why we have Thanksgiving, right? The reason that we have Thanksgiving is that is the history of the kind of the celebrations of colonialism, or the colonists, not colonialism. We weren't celebrating taking shit over, but surviving the journey, relative peace with the Native Americans that turned out real fucking bad. And then several presidents wanted to honor God and wanted us to give thanks to God, including Abraham Lincoln, including Grant as well. And during the Civil War and in many other times in American history, when presidents have needed to bolster their numbers and celebrate war victories, they would establish a proclamation of Thanksgiving to like turn public opinion towards a sense of patriotism for God. We're all in this together, and to celebrate this great, nation and whatever war victories it has. Lincoln needed this in order to solidify the continuance of the Civil War and to maintain his presidency and his popularity, which was, on the decline. And then Grant solidified it after that. So does the history even matter is kind of my question to you guys and to you, Mark, because the socialists talk about how the spirit of Thanksgiving is about like slaughtering of Native Americans. And that's part of it. But I think they're full of shit. I think this is them using the history in a really bad way, right? Like what Thanksgiving is originally is being thankful to God. It's a Christian holiday for survival and for making it through the harvest. And it was about trying to maintain peace relations and trying to live in a Christian image, unsuccessfully many times with the Native Americans. And even in the spirit, and it later became a statist religion, a statist religious holiday to both celebrate God, but also to celebrate, togetherness as a nation. That being said, what I think Thanksgiving actually is, when we look at the history, is that it is a nation that has struggled with its demons towards an ideal goal of being a Christian nation that is better, that needs to heal, and to be thankful that we've made it through our trials and tribulations, and to try and be better people. I'm not a statist, I'm an anarchist, right? Like I don't want to fucking celebrate. I would celebrate the Revolutionary War and the Battle of Saratoga, because those were, fought for liberty from a monarchy. But, I'm certainly not celebrating Lincoln's Gettysburg victory, right? But nevertheless, that's what I think the holiday is. So I think we should celebrate Thanksgiving as a mourning holiday, and have the way we celebrate it now, as a holiday celebrating family gatherings and as thankfulness that we're here. And I don't think it really loses anything to celebrate it that way, even when you look at the real history of Thanksgiving. You just watched a clip from our Twitch channel, Fabian Liberty. If you like content like this, please like and subscribe here on YouTube, or go ahead and give us a follow on twitch.tv/Fabian Liberty.